I'm Mark Hennick. This is So-Called Normal. Hey folks, welcome to So-Called Normal. I'm Mark Hennick. Today on the show we have Rudy Caseres, or as I say to him in the show, that I feel like every time I say his name I should pronounce it Rudy Caseres. But he has corrected me on multiple occasions. I also like to say that he's my best friend, even though we've only ever met in person once. I've appeared on his show a number of times, No Restraints with Rudy Caseres, and now I've had the great opportunity to have him on my show as well. We recorded this in Dallas, Texas, when we finally came together, this wonderful meeting that we had, and spent a couple of days together down there. Rudy, you might know him from, I mentioned his No Restraint show. He does This Is My Brave. He's involved with Healthy Place, Active Minds, the American Association of Suicidology, I believe. You've probably seen him on The Mighty. He's pretty prolific when it comes to mental health and the conversation around it. We have some differences, and we talk about those in a very respectful, I think, way that I think he makes me a better mental health advocate. And I'm pretty sure Rudy would say the same about me, right, Rudy? Anyway, here's my conversation with Rudy Caseres on So-Called Normal.
I've worked with mental health organizations in the past, such as This Is My Brave, which is a storytelling show / nonprofit in the United States and Australia, where they put on these storytelling shows all across the country. And I got to produce the Los Angeles show last year, where I actually proposed to my now wife on stage at the end. And I did Facebook Live shows for them as well. So Facebook Live is my jam. I tried doing an audio podcast once and ended up in the psych ward after 4 weeks.
Wait, was that related to the audio, to the podcast?
If you listen to the last episode, which you shouldn't because it's garbage, it's obvious that I'm going through a hard time. It's a lot of self-doubt. This is before I start talking openly about being bipolar.
Right.
And it was just battle around. It lasted so short that I was able to return the microphone that I bought on Amazon within the
return period. Yeah. Okay. So I feel like we have to do a couple of things here. We have to step back and actually talk about who you are, and maybe we'll get to how we know each other and what you've struggled with and all that stuff. But my favorite question for everybody is to tell me about yourself for those who don't know you.
Hey, everyone. I'm Rudy Caseres. I'm 31 years old, living in Los Angeles, California, United States, North America, Earth.
Does anybody ever call you Rudy Caseres?
Oh, fuck me. Yes. It happens all the time. I did one keynote presentation in Phoenix last year, and it not only did I was like super anal about them pronouncing my name right to the point where they probably thought like I was a diva or something like that. Because on the screen they spelled my name wrong, and I'm just like standing there, just like really annoyed. But there are worse things to complain about in life. Lived in Los Angeles my entire life. Don't speak an ounce of Spanish. I'm an embarrassment to my culture and to the Mexican people at large. I'm bipolar. I was first quote unquote diagnosed in 2015 after a 3-month manic episode while in community college. I've been hospitalized multiple times. I served in the Army for 8 months, which led to a mental breakdown and initial diagnosis of catatonic schizophrenia, because that's another thing I deal with is the catatonic episodes. I don't really hear voices or see things that others don't. Or do I?
I guess you wouldn't know.
Yeah. And so I also, because of my forced hospitalizations and even forced catheterization, which is not fun, don't recommend to anyone, I'm an advocate against forced psychiatric treatment and hospitalization and anything involving coercion and confinement.
So I want to talk. So we've done your show twice, specifically, especially with the second one, with the intention of talking about quote unquote controversial issues. I don't really think that anything is controversial in terms of
some people.
But I think that's how we need to talk about these kinds of things. So I do want to get to coercion and restraint, and that's something that we have a lot in common on, but might differ a bit too. But before we get there, prior to 2015, when you were diagnosed, did you have any hunch that maybe something wasn't right, or you were just really full on loving the mania but hating the depression thing?
I mean, I've pretty much dealt with mental health issues, whatever, my entire life.
Mm-hmm.
The first memory I ever had was me playing house with my brothers and sister, but they wouldn't let me play with them because I was too young and I felt like an outcast, like nobody wanted me.
How many brothers and sisters do you have?
2 and 1.
2 and 1. Yeah.
2 brothers, 1 sister.
Yeah.
And I've never really known my father. He's been in prison my entire life. My mother was in and out of prison for my entire childhood. So, and I've had multiple mentor figures in my life who have all, I wouldn't say abandoned me because for whatever reason they did, but it was just hard. That's what I internalized. That's the story of my life. No matter what people's intentions are or what their word is, I just always feel like someone's abandoning me or is going to abandon me. So healthy adulthood, that does not make.
No, it does not. And I can definitely relate to that experience.
And I remember when I was around 18, I went to community college, Santa Monica College, and I was studying theater arts, which theater for me was like my calling because as shy as I was as a kid and as awkward as I was, I loved entertaining people. I loved making people laugh and being the center of attention. I thought I was going to be like the next Jim Carrey, Tom Hanks, just the next big thing. I always have felt like that from day one, despite all my issues. I've always felt like I was destined for greatness. And that image has changed throughout the years. When I was 19, I wanted to become the next Pope. John Paul II had just passed, and I thought it's time for a change. I was raised Catholic. I was an altar boy, the whole 9 yards. And
so it's Rudy's time to be Pope, basically.
Yeah, I mean, it's time for the cool Pope. I'd be cooler than Pope Francis.
You'd be a great Pope.
Yeah, I know. Because I would hang out with cool people like Mark Hennick, and we'd make totally inappropriate jokes all the time.
Right.
And that would be part of my charm. Right. And that wasn't to be. I remember reading the Bible, for the first time, really reading the Bible and getting really into the book of Acts because Jesus is gone, so to speak. And it's up to his followers to carry on the tradition, which is totally different from what we see as Catholicism, Christianity, the church and everything. It was just people, it was basically socialism. They had no possessions. They shared everything. They wandered through the desert and it's just felt like a harmonious thing. And
there was even division then too, though. Even first generation Christians were divided in how Jewish they were and that kind of
circumcisions.
Thing.
Who cares?
Just be nice to people, right?
Yeah, that's where God crossed. We're not talking about religion, okay?
Right. But you can talk about whatever you want to talk
about. But I was so mad and idealistic because how did we drift so far away? And I was super, you could say I had delusions of grandeur because in my mind, I was going to find a way to bring society back to how we were meant to be. And I annoyed a lot of people. Probably people thought I was a jerk and trying to proselytize everyone. I even had a girlfriend at the time. Can you imagine? We'd be making out, getting hot and heavy, and I'd stop. No, I love you, but I want to become a priest. It's going to happen eventually.
Right.
That was not meant to be.
So why were your parents religious? Where did or was this a symptomatic thing?
Well, I was raised mostly by my grandmother, who was hardcore Catholic, and in my family and a lot of other families, we have a term called cafeteria Catholics, where you'll go to church during Christmas and Easter and funerals, but you have you use condoms, you use birth control, you have kids out of wedlock, you
pick and choose
all
the things
this,
that
basically just the bare minimum.
Right.
And for me, I've always been a very idealistic person and wanted to do the right moral thing. I get so annoyed, so mad when I'm in a situation like I was in the Army where the rules are very well defined. Right. They're out there in print and in word, and I see people just not following them.
Right.
I think that's just part of the human thing is that we just want to just do our own thing, or maybe that's an American thing or a Western culture thing. We just don't like being put into boxes, having rules enforced upon us.
Did you move around a lot, or did you settle in with your grandmother and stay there for your childhood?
In childhood, for the most part, my mother came out of prison when I was 6 months. Right. No, she went into prison when she was 6 months and then came back out when I was 4 and went back in again when I was 7 and then came out for good when I was 10, and then we'd move across like different apartments and what have you.
Right.
And then eventually in 2002, I ended up living with my brother up until the point in 2009 where I joined the Army.
Right. Because I've been thinking about control a lot.
Janet Jackson song?
I actually don't know that Janet Jackson song. I'm not a big Janet Jackson aficionado. Can you sing a few bars?
Control.
That's it. That's
all I got.
No, but I've been thinking about this idea of control because I feel like this is very similar, to my own story, not the prison piece, but just in terms of the uncertainty and the instability and how I think sometimes we grasp at control or rules, rule boundedness, religion, army, maybe as a way to try to make everything make sense, maybe make everything less uncertain and scary. I don't know. What drew you to the Army?
I think it comes to wanting someone to lead me and wanting that father, mother figure.
Right.
I've always been searching for that in my life and always feeling like I've been let down, like I've failed, whether it be at like, I didn't even graduate on stage at junior high. I felt like when I didn't get the lead in My Fair Lady, the musical in high school, I felt like a failure. When
like it was a personal insult.
Oh yeah. When I had my breakdown in the Army, I failed again and all these other things. It's just like a running theme.
So you're in the Army for 8 months?
For 8 months.
It didn't stick? Didn't work out for you?
Well, I mean, I already knew when I joined it was a long shot. Like I've never been that kind of guy, like macho, wanting to shoot shit, all that stuff. It just, I had no other option. Like I wasn't making any money doing theater. I couldn't, I'm 21 at this point. I've never had a real job before. Right. So that makes it very hard.
I don't think that story is all that uncommon, actually. Maybe you met a few people who were like you.
Yeah, well, this is around the time you had the financial crisis and people were losing their homes. I mean, when I was in basic training, there were people who were in their late 30s and had to start all over again that are sending all their money back to their family. Yeah. And here I am, this punk kid who was able to rank up to E3. For those who don't know, it's basically like the private first class. So you get paid more each rank you go up.
Okay.
And so if you have college credits or like over 60 credits, you get promoted automatically. And so here I am, this punk kid who outranks these 30-something-year-old man who is just like, it was not fun. It was one of the worst experiences in my life. It feels like a distant dream now. Like I can't believe that happened to me and it was that bad for that long.
So when was it a sudden realization, I got to get out of here, or was it obvious?
Well, I graduated basic training. I felt like I failed at that. It's very hard to fail basic training, to get recycled and held back. You basically either have to do something stupid like start a fight with a drill sergeant or not being able to pass the physical fitness test. And you get multiple tries. And by the third one, they're basically having you cheat. So
giving you the answers. Yeah.
Yeah. Thankfully, that was, I was able to get through that. And my drill sergeant, who was really cool. I know most people, they hear the word drill sergeant, this constant horrible person, always screaming and everything. And he had that part to him, but he was very as nurturing as you could be as a drill sergeant, basically. He wanted to give back. He loved being a drill sergeant. Right. He loved instilling the Army values and discipline and wanting people to succeed. Yeah. So he would tell me once you get on to the next step, you're gonna do well. That's where you're meant for. Because I was going into military intelligence. Okay. And I'm not a physical guy, but I love to think. But I'm also a bad student. I hate doing homework. I hate studying. I hate reading stuff I don't want to read. Right. And so it was pretty obvious from early on that I was not going to do well in that either, because it's not what you think, military intelligence. You're doing all the top secret James Bond type stuff. And it's mostly just plotting things on a map and boring PowerPoint presentations.
Right. When I first went to undergrad, it was when CSI was in its first season, I think, or something like that. And I loved this idea of criminology. And there's one relatively local university that had a criminology program. So I went there convinced that I was going to be like the people on CSI. Took one intro half-year criminology course and never took another one again because it just wasn't. It was what? We don't get to dust for fingerprints and
you can't zoom and enhance on
exactly
photos.
Yeah, and you don't take your sunglasses off or listen to the Who or anything. It was anyway. I don't know if you've seen CSI, but
Caruso.
Yeah. So you leave the Army. Was it doesn't sound like it was a very difficult decision for you to cut ties.
Well, I had my breakdown and like in the middle of the dining facility.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they had to carry me out like in front of everyone.
Really?
I was suicidal and just wanted to die because I couldn't go back and face my family. I already felt like a failure before that.
Sure.
This for me was the last stand.
Yeah. Was that, do you think the trigger for that was stress? It was the environment, or
it was feeling like it was never going to get better. It was going to get worse. I felt like everyone thought I was weak. I was just like loser, basically, that I was this fairy. I was called that. Oh, also ate up. That's like the Army has like these weird terms that I was ate up. That's basically, I just like don't know what I'm doing. I'm just I'm basically Gomer Pyle.
Right. So you have your as you've described it, a breakdown in the cafeteria. Was that your first hospital admission?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've had times where I had to be removed from school for creating a scene.
Right.
Because of like breakdowns and like catatonic episodes. And I had to like go see a child psychologist to get cleared to come back.
Oh, really?
And like take off like a week of school. This was the first real hospitalization.
Yeah.
And I remember there being a person in basic training who had a similar thing. He went catatonic, just totally blanked out, and they had to take him to the ER. And like none of the drill sergeants, like they all thought he was faking it, and like they're all joking about him. Like it's like we decided I was the one who, with other person, had to pick him up and then throw him on to the truck, the flatbed truck, to take him to the ER. And the drill sergeant was like, just throw him on there. Just throw him on there. It turns out he was actually like second cousins with Alanis Morissette. So go figure.
That was an odd thing to add on.
Yeah, I don't think he was able to like call her up and like get him out of that situation. But they forcibly catheterized him, and he just sat right through it, like not even a blink.
Yeah.
And I thought like, oh my God, that's got to be the worst thing to happen.
Yeah.
Just like that's what an invasion of privacy, of space and dignity.
Yeah. Tell me about catatonia. I have a charming habit of dissociation, especially under stress. That's when I'll just go somewhere else. But it's never been full catatonia where I check out. What do you remember? Are you aware in those episodes?
I'm fully aware, and all these things are going in my head. Because I always feel like I screwed up as soon as it happens. It's like, I'm going to go to the hospital, or like people are going to think I'm this freak. I'm this like mentally ill, crazy person. Like maybe he's going to snap out of it and like start wanting to shoot people up. And it's always in public, and it's just really, and I feel it coming. I remember one time I was rehearsing for a play, and I go up to the director and saying like, I don't feel like I'm going to freak out. And I remember her saying a few days before, because they had some suicides like in the theater department of past years. And he said like, if you ever feel like you're going to do too much, come up to me. And I remembered that. And I went up to her, and she was like, just take a seat, just calm down, and we'll see what we can do. And I sat down, and I wasn't able to get up on my own. I was taken off to a stretcher eventually to the ER, and it was in front of everyone. I'm stretchered out in front of my acting peers, and it was just a bad time in 2014.
Yeah, and it must be scary too to be in that place. Do you feel trapped in your body?
Because I don't want people to see me. I don't want people to talk to me. I remember them asking if my mom was there in the waiting room, like, do I want to see her?
Right.
And I said, no, absolutely not. I will find a way home on my own. And she came in there anyway. And I was so mad because it's just part of the paternalism. That's another issue. It's just funny because I want that mother-father figure, but I also hate paternalism. Like someone is trying to like run my life for me and like trying to tell me what to do when they don't know what they're doing in the first place.
And I don't think people appreciate fully that that's still very much how the system is. Like we're only talking, this was 2015, I think? 2014. Even still, that wasn't that long ago. And we're well into, by that point, mental health awareness and the wave of people opening up and sharing stories. And, I think we've come a long way, but people don't realize that if you actually visit a psychiatric hospital or a psych ward in a hospital, not a whole lot has really changed. It still very much is that paternalistic model. And that's what you experienced inside too.
Yeah. And I was actually hospitalized a few weeks after that too.
Right.
I guess EMTs or whatever, they basically broke into my bedroom and forcibly took me out, put me into the 5-point restraints. Even though I was talking, I was trying to my best abilities, try to explain that I'm not like dangerous or anything like that. Like, why would you put me in restraints? And then that was when I was also forcibly catheterized, when I was taken to the ER despite like telling them I will pee in the cup because like they want to do the drug test and all that stuff. And I wasn't giving that option. And thankfully there was a psychiatric nurse who really helped talk me through that, and who eventually was able to talk her supervisor into removing it.
I had always found that often the nurses or support staff, sometimes even the janitors, were the people that you got the most information from, who sometimes were the most comforting.
The lowest. I mean, in the whole bureaucracy, the chain of command, it's usually like the lowest people on that totem pole who are the most compassionate, and they get it. They know you don't want to be there. They know that this is a scary place, and they feel it's like they're calling you. It's like these guardian angels. I talk to a lot of people like this who have been in similar situations where it's like this person came out of nowhere and then they never saw them again. Like it feels like a guardian angel, like someone coming into your life at the right time, at your most vulnerable, most scary part of your life. And thankfully those people exist, because otherwise, like I don't know if I would have survived.
So what did they do for you when you were discharged? Eventually, obviously, you were discharged. And then sounds like went back in fairly quickly after.
The last time in 2014, because they took me out of my bedroom.
Right.
I didn't have shoes on.
Right.
So they gave me like shoes that are 2 sizes too big, and they gave me bus tokens, even though there was only a rail within walking distance. So I had to go walk to a bank and get picked up by a friend who thankfully was able to do so.
So the show is based in Canada, where we like to brag about how we have universal health care. That doesn't really apply to everything in mental health care. But even still, we can still go into an emergency room, for example, or get picked up very often involuntarily, and it's generally covered. The expenses are covered. Did you have insurance? Was that the case for you? When you get taken involuntarily here, are you on the hook for the expense for that as well?
No. I mean, they would try to bill me and just throw it away, or because I have never paid for medical bills. And
that actually happened to me too. And I thought, because I got a bill for being involuntarily admitted to a psych ward, and I thought this is actually equivalent to a fine, because I didn't have a choice whether or not I went. I wasn't buying your service. You gave me your service against my will.
There was a time where I passed out from heat exhaustion inside the California State Capitol right before I was going to accept the award, and they picked me up. They took me to the ER, to a veterans hospital, and I have veterans health care, which is very, very fortunate. I know not everyone can get that and get 100% disability.
Sure.
But I was still charged for the ride to the ER and the stay and everything. And it's like, what? How does this happen? And finally it went away on its own. But it's like, it's not like I had any kind of choice in this.
Yeah. Yeah. So obviously, and you've mentioned a few times being carried away in a stretcher with everybody watching, whether it's your army peers or your theater peers or whoever else. And that's just about one of the most embarrassing things that you can experience. I don't know if anybody or if everybody listening can fully appreciate what that's like, but it's pretty awful. Now, though, in the years since, you've made a pretty drastic turn in terms of being open about your own experience and sharing. And do you still have that embarrassment of people, finding out about what you've been through or being in that vulnerable kind of state?
No, because I think my advocacy is fueled by anger. I don't want this to happen to other people. And I want the people who it's happened to have their stories be validated, because oftentimes I use this as a tagline for my show, No Restraints, because it's for your own good.
Right.
Because that's what we get told. It's over and over again. Like, oh, I'm sorry for your luck. Like, you're the exception to the rule, but it was probably for your own good. And I really want to erase that for the people who've had that experience happen. Yeah. I mean, it's amazing they didn't die by suicide, because that often happens when people are either in the psych ward or leave the psych ward within the following couple of weeks. I want people to be as angry as me, even people who haven't been hospitalized, because we need allies. We need accomplices to change things, to change policy. Okay. We need to move on beyond just talking about these things. We need to change things. There are practical things in the system, whatever, in politics and laws within our communities that we can actively change, other than just oh, that's a thing.
Right. Yeah. The conversation, the talk is an important starting point. But then again, the risk that we face, and I think we're in this place now where people talk so much about mental health, they still don't really talk about things like suicide or schizophrenia or even severe bipolar disorder, like the really difficult, challenging stuff. The intersection with between violence and mental illness. Whenever somebody does something that breaks the law as a symptom of their mental illness, which there's no real connection there, but it does happen from time to time. People want to jump to the revenge and the punishment, and that's when they suddenly don't understand anymore what psychosis could be like. I think I talked to you about this on one of your shows, maybe, on how I got attacked for defending the NCR, as we call it in Canada, not criminally responsible legislation, because people want to see people punished when they're not at their best, especially if they do things that hurt other people. Have you talked to people in your career so far who have found themselves in those kinds of situations where they do things when they're manic or experiencing psychosis or something like that actually impacts others, and how they figure that out? Yeah,
and it's always rooted in, well, not to make blanket terms, like I don't like to say always, but it's always rooted in them not being fulfilled. There are needs that are not being met.
Right.
And sometimes those needs sound bizarre to you and I on the outside, but it comes from not being heard, not being understood, not feeling like their voice is being heard, not feeling like they're having access to the conversation.
Right.
And that can make people do weird things.
Well, and you experience that firsthand in these kinds of psychiatric facilities as well. How long would they keep you on each of these?
Usually around, except for the emergency room where I was left out the same day, the two times, the once in the Army and the other one in theater, it was around 6-7 days.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's fairly common, kind of a stabilize and kick you out kind of thing. Did you ever get any follow-up care from them?
Not from those hospitals. I would eventually, because I was also seeing a therapist and a psychiatrist around that time.
Okay.
And so I would talk to him about it, but it didn't help me.
Was there a sudden revelation of some kind that things turned for you and you started doing the work that you're doing now, or was it more of a slow thing? I still felt
very weak in 2014. It wasn't until the end of 2014, because I got involved with a mental health club on campus, became the president. I also became manic. And then after that crash, I was like, this is my calling, because this is my life. Like, the whole bipolar and the mania and everything. So there's no turning back from it. I'm not going to hide it. Right. I'm going to be fully open about it and make this my calling. The theater didn't work out. The Army didn't work out. But damn it, this is what I'm going to do come hell or high water.
Well, you're very good at it. And you're certainly spreading a great message.
Yeah. And one of the things I've had to learn, and I think any person becoming into adulthood should learn this as well. I learned it later than I should have, is that the thing that makes you most fulfilled or successful is not necessarily always fun.
Right.
Oftentimes it's grueling, and it's that cherry at the end of the top. That is the thing that's actually nice and fun. And this can be fun. Like, we enjoy ourselves every now and then.
Yeah, but 90% of it is work of what we do. Right.
Yeah, and just feeling like, maybe I'm 100% wrong. Maybe everything I'm saying, maybe people should be forcibly hospitalized. Maybe I should have killed myself at that time.
Well, so actually, I want to get into these issues. So I think in terms of the compelling treatment issue, there's a wide spectrum of what people believe here. There's very much the old school archetypal, it's for your own good, and the system very much still works in that way. Although there's been legislation put in place, at least in Ontario, Canada, where I currently live, that it's relatively difficult to hold people against their will in hospital. Fairly easy to get them in for assessment, but then to keep them any longer than a 72-hour hold is quite difficult. So, and that's a good thing, and it arose out of experiences like yours, I think, that still aren't all that uncommon. But there are people who advocate very strongly for forced hospitalization. What I've noticed, and I don't know if this is a universal thing or a true thing at all, but sometimes parents, caregivers, loved ones advocate for the forced hospitalization of the people that they see as struggling, especially often in the case of parents. What do you say to people who are big advocates for, no, this person needs to stay in the hospital in order to get better and to be safe?
Look, if I had a son or daughter, especially if they were like 16, 17, 18, 19, and they were driving me crazy, just constantly in and out of prison or even verbally or physically abusive towards me, I would throw my hands up and like, what else can I do? Like maybe someone else should handle this and maybe they need to be put away for a while and like, maybe they can fix it out. I believe, and many others do, is you can't just put someone in a box and pretend like that's going to solve all their problems. You can't put them on a compound or on the outskirts of town. And that's just, it doesn't work.
Right.
And for the people who it quote unquote works for, I really feel as if those are the people who are weak. I mean, that probably sounds
what do you mean
mean-spirited.
No, what do you
because
mean?
they allow themselves to be manipulated. And oftentimes, well, it's like you have the carrot at the end of the stick. It was, well, if I comply and take my meds, even though they're giving me these awful side effects, or I go to the hospital when I'm told to or made to, then I will be able to have as normal of a life as possible.
Right.
I'll be able to go to school or be left alone, all this stuff. And that is very tempting.
And that's actually, I never really thought of it in quite these terms before, but psychiatric hospitalization is very much like the public school system in that it actually doesn't matter how smart you are. It matters how well you comply and how normal you can act. And if you're, as became the case with me, if you become known as a frequent flyer, somebody who's in and out a lot through the revolving door, you learn what the doctors are looking for, what they want you to say. Are you thinking about killing yourself? No. Because I want to go home.
Yeah.
So you learn that. You learn how to meet people's expectations, I think. It's not necessarily about how well you're doing.
Yeah, and oftentimes we think the only options are the psych ward or the prison or on the streets, I guess.
Right.
And that's shame on us as a society because we need to be offering more and more options because that's horrible. And people who are in the forced treatment camp say, well, if someone is not in a hospital, they're going to end up on the streets or in prison. And what's the point of having civil rights protection if that's what's going to happen?
Right. Yeah.
And it's like, no, like there's got to be a better way.
Right. So what about the person who is actively suicidal and isn't sure what else to do, that they're going to kill themselves?
Well, I know this is where we disagree. I do believe in the right to suicide. I don't think it should be like promoted like, yes, like go kill yourself as the first. I know like we as a people need to do all we can to look out for one another. Oftentimes people kill themselves because they don't feel like anyone cares or that people look down on them. They're a burden and they feel like they're doing society solid if they do kill themselves. And we need to be more interconnected. We should do so much work, and we don't, before that person gets to that point, before someone gets to that bridge or gets that gun, and we don't.
We're in total agreement on that piece. I mean, you don't prevent suicide by lining up ambulances under the bridge, right? That happens way in advance. It happens way even in advance of the experience of depression or whatever else is informing. And there's lots of things that inform suicide. But you're right. That is a point where we depart in that. Sometimes the reality is in most communities, they don't have those kinds of upstream interventions. Actually, I'm not aware of anywhere that has really significant upstream interventions that prevent suicide. Some areas are doing better than others. So I tend to be of the view, while yes, I reject 90% of compelled treatment, there's still that last 10% where I think it's necessary. And I would qualify that by saying you have to know what it's for. I would strongly try to inform people who think that you go to hospital with a mental illness to get better. You go to hospital with other things to get better. You don't get better with a mental illness in hospital. Actually, very often you get worse. At least that's been my experience. So I think that understanding what it's for, it's to keep you safe for a brief period of time until you can get unlocked from that place in your mind. Then I'm less opposed to that. But it sounds like you're a definite 100%.
Well, I think if someone has tried everything, they've been in the hospital multiple times, they can say with reasonable sense and articulate themselves of why they've tried everything, they've been in despair their entire life, and all these things are just feel insurmountable. And it's been decades of feeling like this. Like what else can we say to them?
And that's the other piece too. So again, I don't think, obviously, that suicide is a crime. I very actively, and because it's not in most jurisdictions anymore, that's why we don't say commit suicide anymore, because it's not a crime, or at least why we shouldn't. But people already have the right to kill themselves in most jurisdictions. And anybody who's ever attempted suicide knows it's not terribly difficult to do. It's not mechanically complicated to do. It tends to be an impulse. And it tends to, it sounds like it's trivializing, but this is where I got to in my head. It seems like a good idea at the time. And even if you're locked into that time for a long period, I hear all the time from people who say, I've tried everything. Okay, well, let's interrogate that a little bit. What did you actually try? And they're going to give me a list of 5, 10 things that they may have tried in which the system screwed them in some way or another. That's not their fault. They've been victimized by a system that doesn't work, but that doesn't mean that they can't be helped, and it doesn't mean that help and hope isn't available to them. So I tend to be in the not only should we do everything that we can possibly do to prevent suicide, even if that person is allowed to theoretically do it, we should not be enabling easier pathways for people to die by suicide. And this is where we, I think, disagreed on the idea of medical assistance in dying.
Yeah, I don't think it's, for me, like, I'm not going to like give the guns away or anything like that.
Of course. But I hear what you're saying, though. If somebody's been dealing, for example, with depression, chronic, severe depression for 20 years, and they see no other way out, that they've quote unquote tried everything, even though I find that a difficult thing to accept as well. It sounds like you're saying that there comes a point where, yeah, we should sign off and say that it's okay.
Yeah, I mean, and we should also say shame on us.
Right.
As an interconnected society,
right.
It's not enough to just talk someone off the bridge.
No.
There's follow-up. Okay, why did this person get to this point? And it's usually more than they're just have made shitty decisions in life or been really depressed. There's also a lot of societal oppression. We often forget that there are very marginalized groups where it's basically suicide to be in these marginalized groups, such as trans people, especially trans people of color, people with certain disabilities, autistics. And like, there's nothing I can say that's, oh, your life is going to get better. Society is going to change. You're going to have all of these accessibility now. There's nothing I can say that is actually honest to say that their lives are going to get better. I could say like, oh, you could like find meetups and like join Facebook groups and you can find different ways to get connected. But I can't guarantee that.
No, of course you can't. And if you can, or if anybody else can, I would like to meet them because, I think in some ways our life getting better is such a drastically subjective experience. What does that even mean? For me, it happens to have been re-narrating, deciding for whatever reason that this is something that I could use rather than let it use me. But there's lots of different routes to happiness and fulfillment and meaning. And, are you happier now than you were when you were initially going through these struggles?
I don't see things as happiness or even fun. I see things as, am I fulfilled? Am I getting my needs met?
Well, are you?
In some ways. I don't think anyone's ever fully fulfilled. Otherwise, they become the Buddha.
Yeah.
But I feel like I'm actively working towards that. Before I felt helpless because that's what I was led to believe. The people who would try to lift me up left me.
If you had met yourself way back then when you were going through these crises, would you have listened to the stuff that you say? Would you have believed that life is someday accessible to you?
No, because people would tell me that. My therapist would tell me it over and over again. Like, Rudy, you're so smart. Like, I don't even tell this to all of my clients. You can do so much better than this. You have all the potential. And I would say, no, like, you don't get it. Okay. You can do all of the motivational speeches and all that stuff. But I know fully well that I suck. That I'm a loser. I don't deserve to be loved. I certainly can't love myself. Look at me.
Do you love yourself now?
No.
Why not?
I want to. And maybe I'll get to that point. I feel it's like another one of those things such as happiness or fun. It's more of a journey rather than a state of being to constantly be in. There are certainly times where I do love myself.
Sure.
There are times where I am just in a state of bliss. Everything's clicking, everything's right. But then there's all these obstacles and adversity, which everyone needs. People need adversity in life. That's the human experience. But there's still certain parts of self-hatred, usually towards my body. I always dealt with body image issues my entire life.
Right.
I was actually talking to a friend about this last night, and I started crying, and I rarely cry. And it's just things like that, or feeling like I should be making more money at this point, or I should have more followers, as stupid as that sounds. And
doesn't sound stupid at all.
So I'm very hard on myself, and I've gotten better at it. Like, I don't think that I'm a complete failure. Obviously, I'm here talking with you, and we're doing great things in the advocacy world. It's not like where it's like a Sisyphean thing where we're just constantly trying to push that boulder up. We are making gains.
Have I ever showed you my statue on my bookshelf of Sisyphus pushing his boulder up a hill?
Oh, did you post it on Instagram?
I might have, yeah.
Okay.
Anyway,
you have a much better home than me.
I don't. But I have fun, and I think that what you're saying is probably, well, this is why you're so effective at what you do and why you touch and impact so many people. I called this podcast So-Called Normal because I think we're always striving after this idea, this perfect ideal, especially when we're really unwell, when we're really unhappy, that why can't I access that secret that everybody else seems to have figured out? Why is everybody else normal? Why is everybody else happy and beautiful and fit or whatever else? Why can't I have that too? It turns out nobody really has that. I think we build that up into something that's unattainable.
Yeah, and then once you get it, it's still not enough.
We change it. Then it becomes something else. It's always over the horizon. There's a great TED Talk about that, about happiness, that we're always looking for something else. So
there's quite a few great TED Talks.
There are, yeah. Thank you for that very subtle nod for like the one big thing that I've ever done in my life, in professional life, maybe.
Yeah, no, you're on CBC, so that's awesome too.
I hope that you never lose the willingness to be vulnerable in this way, in the way that you often are, because I don't think that people follow advocates, whatever that even means. I don't even always call myself a mental health advocate anymore because I'm not entirely clear what that means. But I think people follow this group of people because they're tapping into something that everybody is feeling, that everybody recognizes. I mean, you must have heard over your time, your years of doing this so far, stories from people you've impacted or who have related to the stories that you share.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't do what I do without being vulnerable.
Right.
It's just a byproduct. I mean, it is like how I get to where I am, to come to conferences, to meet with amazing people, to do speeches, all that stuff, because I'm willing to tap into something that very, very few people are willing to go to.
Right. Even though they lots of people have it in them, not everybody is able to do that work. So how do you, I kind of conceptualize this in my mind as going back there and it's like dipping your foot back in the water again, but then pulling back out again in terms of, re-narrating your story, going back into some of the more difficult things, sharing really personal things about yourself. Have you found a rhythm yet of how you deal with that, how you take care of yourself while also being vulnerable?
Yes, because I think, maybe. I think a part of the human experience is suffering and sacrifice. And that doesn't always mean self-care. We need to push myself. That's been part of my success, as unhealthy as that sounds. The fact is that in order to be successful, one must make sacrifices. One must not always be the best self-care person, right? Because there'll be times, and you know this, where you have to stay up all night to work on a project.
Sure.
You have to drive like hundreds of miles to get somewhere that you might not even be paid for. You might actually lose money at.
Sometimes you have to take ridiculous risks, then you do end up failing. And actually you fail more than you succeed.
Yeah.
But nobody ever sees the failures.
And that's the struggle of being a mental health advocate. You promote self-care, you promote recovery, you promote all these positive things that are awesome. But to do what we do, the hours we put in, the flying, the being away from our families, all that stuff, we're not necessarily the best role models, are we?
Well, actually, I've reframed this in my mind. There's self-care is very popular now, of course, and people like to talk about bubble baths. But I think that self-care has turned into a Pages of Cosmo kind of fluff thing. And actually, that's not how I conceptualize it at all. I conceptualize it more like what you're talking about, more in the mindfulness tradition of falling away and coming back. And it's a practice. Self-care is a practice. And it means getting uncomfortable and then repairing it. There's I don't know if you can hear this on the microphone, but there's a thunderstorm outside as we're speaking. So
it fills my belly.
it might, it might be very hungry. But this idea, though, of recovery, the way that I conceptualize it, of course, doesn't mean cure. It doesn't mean somehow you've found the golden ring or got to the ark or whatever it is. That it's a cycle of just continual mismatch and repair, of falling away and coming back, of development, of getting better. And in that sense, there's never, I hope anyway, because I got a lot invested in this, that there's never any end to recovery, that there's always a place to go up. I don't know. How do you define recovery?
I want to be clear. I don't want to be cured of bipolar. Right. It's part of me. It's not all of me. That's what people think. Like, oh, like you're more than your diagnosis. Of course right. I am. Like I'm all.
And you also identify. You say, and we've talked about this before. I am bipolar, and there's a movement in, the mental health language kind of community around saying I have bipolar, I have depression, I have schizophrenia, versus I am schizophrenic or I am bipolar, to try to separate the experience from the person.
Yeah, and those are some of the same people who say love the person, hate the illness.
Right. And I don't like that either.
Yeah. That's for me. That's just awful because it is a part of me. I'm also a husband. I'm also Mexican American. I'm also a man. I'm all these other things. Right. So if I said I'm a man, like no one would come up to me. It's like, no, you are more than your gender. It's like, well, yes, of course I am.
Well, some people would. Yeah. But actually, I think that it's great to find something to really lock into and to orient your life around, but appreciating that you are many different things. I went through a period of time where I didn't want to do the mental health thing for a while, when I want to just go and do something else and find myself or whatever. And I think that's normal. That's what you're supposed to do.
Yeah, and I think we need to borrow more language from the disability community because, it's considered ableist if you want someone to rise up from their wheelchair. Like there's this whole meme of Stephen Hawking being lifted up off his wheelchair into the heavens, even though he was like a very staunch atheist. Right. And that's the thing. We think that people in those states like are in these. They don't want to be there, and like we need to cure them. Right. And the thing is, these things often suck. Okay. Yeah. Like not always having access, not always having ramps, not always having ALS, not having ASL. Sorry, not always having captions, all that stuff. That stuff sucks. Yeah. Having flare-ups, that sucks. Like all these things suck. There's so much about bipolar that sucks. But guess what? That's just my life.
It's just
I deal with it. Yeah. That's my cross that I bear. That's my adversity. Right. But if I didn't have any kind of adversity, I wouldn't be on this podcast, first off.
I guess you would. I would have you anyway.
Yeah. Normal guy, Rudy Caseres.
Perfectly normal
No
person.
adversity, complete white bread. Yeah.
But and this is the thing though, right? And I've said this before and it's difficult for people to understand this idea, but I'm actually grateful, and it took me a long time to get to this place. I'm actually grateful for the really shitty things in my life and the really weird things that I think and the awful dark periods that I've been through. That's not to say that I'm grateful and celebrating and having a party. Oh, yay, I'm relapsing. This is wonderful. It's that I learn something new about myself every time, and I am who I am because of what I've been through.
Yeah, and the thing is, Mark, I will never be grateful for my forced hospitalizations.
No.
You wouldn't tell someone who was a victim of domestic abuse, well, isn't that great that you were beat? Because now you get to be this advocate.
Gosh. Yeah. And let's be clear, that's definitely not what I'm suggesting. But, and this is where I think the nuance comes in, of course, that.
Yeah, and that's what I'm getting at. Like, I understand what you're saying.
Why, what else am I going to do with my memories and my experience, right? If I want to choose to be grateful about anything, any of the shit that I've been through, I'm allowed to do that with my own experience, right? And anybody else is too. What I've found is that being angry about it, especially getting stuck in the cycle of why did this happen to me, or why have I been so unfortunate or broken or whatever, and if that doesn't serve you, and I think that's the key. If you're using that as you are, if it's your energy, if it's serving a purpose, then great. But if it's actually making your life worse, well, then why do I want to cling to that so tightly?
Well, when I was younger, I wanted to believe I had the worst life out of anyone. That all the things I failed at, well, at least I can succeed at having the worst life and people will feel sorry for me. I wanted that so bad up until fairly recently. I wanted people to feel sorry for me because I couldn't succeed. I'm weak. I want people to baby me. I want people to coddle me. And then I broke free from that. And that's the exact opposite I want from people. I want people to say, that Rudy, he's a badass, and that I want him on my team. I will march to the gates of hell with him. And that's where I'm at. And I'm so glad. And it came from a place of rebelling, from a place of anger and not wanting to be confined and coerced.
Recovery is such a beautiful process. And I'm sorry I'm not sorry. That to be able to hear that part of your story in particular, and to help people realize that, again, recovery, in my view, doesn't mean cure. It's this journey. It's this process. It's this weird thing that looks differently for everybody. And for you to be able to say that change, that evolution, whatever it is, that saves a lot of people's lives. And if that's where you are in your life right now, then I hope that continues to develop, because you're saving a lot of people's lives.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And the thing is, I can't stress this enough. The reason why I do what I do is based in anger and not wanting it to happen to others and not wanting to happen to myself. There's a bit of selfishness in that. And redemption. I want to prove people wrong. All the people who said I couldn't do anything, or I'm meant to live in a hospital, or all these other things, not being able to live life on my own terms. I want to be so good at what I do that people cannot deny me. I refuse to be denied, Mark. And that's like the secret sauce to my success and to many people. I tell that to people: be so good at what you are that your biggest detractors can't help but recognize it. Like, I don't like that Rudy Caseres. He's this and that, but damn it, he's just so good at what he does that I have to accept it. Damn it, he's just I need to adapt things from my own stuff. Yeah. I need to steal what Rudy Caseres is doing, as much as I hate that.
I'm all fired up now. I feel like we should go do some shots and just, because I am with you.
Rip my shirt open.
This has been fun. Thank you.
No, awesome. And the thing is, I give you a hard time and I talk a lot of shit, but I really do admire you. And the thing I like about you is that I can talk shit and I can bust your balls and we can
you said we were frenemies. I thought we were just friends.
Yeah, no.
I'm going to start calling you my best friend and make you uncomfortable. Rudy Caseres, my best friend.
Okay. And that's if you got to dish it out, right? If I dish it out, then I got to take it. So, and that's right. That's what's great about our dynamic, is that we recognize that we're not we don't really hate each other. We're not really frenemies.
As far as you know.
I mean, we have our disagreements. We have slightly different values on certain subject matter, but we all have the same goal. And that's why I like you, is that we can come together, we can disagree, and we can do all these things and call each other names. But in the end, we're both trying to save lives. We're both trying to change the narrative, and we're both trying to make money doing public speaking.
I'm going to cut that last part out.
You edit that out?
Don't pull back the curtain. All right, Rudy, it's been fun. Thanks so much.
Awesome.
All right, that's my conversation with Rudy Caseres. I can have all kinds of different names for it, but go check out Rudy. He's such a fun guy, and I really respect the work that he does. He makes me a better mental health advocate, as I've said before, and I think that his voice is so important in the mental health conversation. So go check out the work that he's doing on Facebook and across social media. It'll make you a better mental health advocate as well. So if you want to hear more of my guests, and I hope you do, I hope you enjoy enjoy the show, head over to Apple Podcasts, subscribe, leave us a rating, leave some comments if you like, share it with your friends and family on social. You can tag me as well. I'm on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, everywhere. Most places at Mark Hennick, at MarkHenick. You can also go over to markhennick.com and read more about my background, my work there as well. If you want to try out some free psychotherapy, a free trial of safe, effective psychotherapy with screened professional therapists, highly credentialed therapists, go over to betterhelp.com/Mark, enter the promo code Mark, and you can try out that free trial. You never know until you try, right? If you can't afford psychotherapy or you're concerned about what it's like and you've never tried it before, go try it out online. And if you don't like it halfway through the call, you can hang up. If you don't like it 10 minutes in, you can just hang up. It's fine. You never know until you try. So go to betterhelp.com/Mark, enter the promo code Mark. I'd like to thank my whole production team here at Entertainment One, Adrian, Kimberly, Allison, my editor, Dave Trafford, everybody who's involved in bringing this show together. It's really a privilege for me to be able to have these kinds of conversations that get deep into people's stories in the way that I think is important and the way that we figure out that there's not really any such thing as normal at all. We're just making it all up as we go. So that's what So-Called Normal is all about. Thanks for listening. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for sharing the show. I'm Mark Hennick.